All right, for more, we are joined by Erica Fleishman. She's a professor and director of Oregon Climate Change Research Institute at Oregon State University. Professor, thank you very much for your time. First of all, just tell us about how Maui's wildfires escalated to such a catastrophic level so fast. What do you think is behind the severity and persistence of these fires?
The wind played a very large role in making the wildfire spread quite rapidly and making it very difficult to contain that wildfire. The vegetation that the wildfire is going through, the plants, is quite dry right now. Much of Maui is in drought. So you had a coincidence of high temperatures and very dry vegetation and high winds, and that makes wildfires again spread quite rapidly and be very difficult to contain.
That's a combination of factors that all have to be in place for this devastation to all sort of happen to the extent that it did. Is that sort of thing predictable?
Yeah. To some extent, the high temperatures during some times of the year are predictable. Drought can come up very quickly, but more often is a gradual trend. It's becoming predictable that that over decades now, many parts of the world are becoming drier in general, and droughts are becoming more frequent and longer and more severe. So in that sense, the trend toward drier conditions, hotter conditions, that's predictable. Some of the long-term changes in vegetation, some of the long-term changes from native vegetation to non-native vegetation that burns quite readily, that's also that's known, that's predictable. So some of those pre-existing conditions that can enable a wildfire when there's a spark and high winds, those are known.
I mean, it's not just Hawaii, Professor, but we've seen European countries like Greece and Italy, Canada, North Africa grappling with wildfires this year. Is this a new normal? And will it just get worse from here?
It may at least for a while. It's very difficult to contain these wildfires. More parts of the world are becoming dry and wildfire prone. So in some cases, there are higher frequencies of wildfires than there were in past decades, past centuries. And so there are some parts of the world where, unfortunately, wildfires may become more prevalent.
Now, clearly more needs to be done on sort of the climate front. But do we also need to rethink things more locally where we live and how we can keep communities safe from these fires? Are we seeing movement in that regard?
There are a lot of opportunities to better protect people's lives, people's health, people's livelihoods. Like so many other things, it requires political will, it requires reallocation of resources, and often working with the affected communities in local areas to say what resources are most important to you. What do you feel is best for you to be able to safeguard people's lives and health and things that you care about? So there's not necessarily one solution in all cases, but I think there is a lot of reason for hope that even as it may be very difficult to prevent wildfires from happening, the negative effects of those wildfires on people, there may be some opportunities to reduce those negative effects.
You talked about the negative effects, Professor. I mean, it's clear to see the short-term effects of wildfires, but what are the long-term effects of them on the environment, ecosystem, and of course, human health?
Yeah, I'm going to focus on human health. We think about the flames a lot of times when the fires are going, but there's the smoke. The smoke can affect people quite far from the fire itself. And the effects of smoke, all of the pollutants that smoke contains, can have more and more research is suggesting that the long-term effects of exposure to that smoke can be fairly severe for people of all ages, for that matter, of animals, of livestock, of wild animals, perhaps as well. So the long-term health effects, both physical and mental, can be pretty pervasive. There are studies suggesting that the incidence of interpersonal violence increases somewhat, a little bit, but in a meaningful way when people are exposed to the pollutants and wildfire smoke. So there are some long-term effects. Certainly for the people that are displaced, it's quite difficult mentally in addition to in other ways. And it's also difficult for some of the places that receive the evacuees, whether that's a short-term evacuation or especially a long-term evacuation. So the effects on health can be quite pervasive.
U.S. forecasters are warning of a 95% chance that the El Nino weather pattern will prevail through the winter months into next year. That's worsening the risks of heat waves. How concerned should we be, especially for countries like Australia, whose summer months are yet to come?
Yeah, it is likely to be extremely hot in many parts of the world. July 2023 was the hottest month on record worldwide. The climate is changing. It is becoming warmer, and it doesn't become warmer over the long term without a lot of short-term heat waves. The duration of heat waves, the frequency, the intensity is changing worldwide, and unfortunately, we are seeing that. And as many people have observed, there will be many more record-breaking months ahead in our collective future. Again, there are things that can be done to increase people's resilience to those temperatures if there's the political will and the allocation of resources and the working closely with affected parties to understand what they feel that they most need.
Yeah, we'll have to leave the discussion on political will for another day, but thank you so much for your expertise this morning, Professor Erica Fleishman, Professor and Director of the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute at Oregon State University.